There you go. All right. So what's happening?
Well, so we talked, I think, last week, and I read, you have on your website, it's a Buddhadasa, I don't know, let me look. It was just kind of like a sort of summary, I guess, it wasn't breath awareness or anything like that. It was just kind of let me pull it up. I don't remember what it was called.
Are you talking about something that I've done or something that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa?
Buddhadasa.
Okay.
Let me pull it up. Here it is. Spiritual disease.
Okay.
The natural cure for spiritual disease. Yeah. And I started reading the Anapanasati Sutta.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Anapanasati.
But
I should have talked to you about that already.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about it, but I started it, but then I stopped it because I got kind of bogged down because it was longer than I thought. Well, okay, so there was, so I looked, so there's, okay, so there was a Buddhadasa, I don't know what it is, like a description of the Anapanasati Sutta. So it wasn't just the sutta, I guess it was some, like, explanation of it, but it was longer than I thought, so I haven't actually read it, but that's what I want to do next.
Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has actually had five books published on Anapanasati, but really the really early one, somehow or another the galleys got messed up, and so it's only 3/4. But since then there's been 4 books published on Anapanasati.
Okay.
By Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Well, this one is called just Mindfulness of Breathing.
Okay, that was the one that Santikaro did the translation on.
Okay, so if I was just going to read one of his, or to start with anyway, is that a good one to start with?
No.
Okay. Well, where should I start?
Well, you can start by listening to the Dhamma talks that are on YouTube.
Okay.
Both by myself and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Okay.
Or you can go to the suttas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on, I'll put a little note.
Yeah, so you can just, in Google, or actually in YouTube, you can just type Dhammarato or Buddhadasa and come up with all kinds of stuff.
Sounds good. I've been doing the mindfulness of breathing during the day.
Mindfulness of breathing is the English language translation of Anapanasati.
Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that during the day. I made a game out of it that's working pretty well. I have this app on my phone that I don't know if it's worth grabbing, but basically it's just it's something that records time. So like I have like 2 or 3 categories, but they're different kinds of like mindfulness, but like mindfulness of breathing is the main thing. And so what I do is like I'll just I don't know if you can see that.
All I see is a white screen.
Is it going to adjust though? Is it better now?
No, I can't read much of any of it. I
Okay.
see a blue square, a yellow, a green, blue, red square on the left-hand
Okay.
side.
Okay. Well, basically, it's this app called Hours, and it's free. And what you can do is like, so it says breath. Well, it's basically the mindfulness thing that I'm doing at the time. It starts a timer. So you see this little green thing up here.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that it's keeping track of how long that category is on. And then if I change to
I
like
don't understand what you mean by that category
okay,
on.
so what it's meant to do is it's meant to kind of track what tasks you're doing during the day. So, for instance, if you're like, you know, if you're working for somebody else and you want to track your time, how much you spend on project A versus project B versus project C,
I
it's,
understand.
it's a
Okay. You
timeline.
do not need that application. You
Well,
can throw that one out. I've got better apps for you.
no, but listen to, I've tried the other ones. But I made a game out of it, and this is what I like. So I turn on, uh-oh, I turn on the breathing thing, and
I
it
don't know
starts.
what you mean by turning on the breathing thing.
All right.
I turn on the breathing thing. Watch.
Okay. Okay. So I have like mindfulness of breathing, for example, and so it's just this very clean
As
kind
an
of
activity that you put into the cell phone.
yeah. But
All
so when I
right, okay. I'm trying to decide whether we're talking about anapanasati or whether we're talking about cell phones.
well anapanasati. So I turn it on, and
You
then
turn
it's
it on, the cell phone.
no. I push. I push. It's hard to. Basically, all it does is it's meant to track.
Make sure your pronouns have objects.
So it
I'm
tracks.
not following you.
Okay. It tracks.
No, what is the it? What are you talking about? It tracks.
The,
Anapanasati, I ask you, are you talking about cell phones or are you talking about anapanasati? You said you're talking about anapanasati.
yeah, but I'm using.
Anapanasati is not an it that can track.
Okay. Is the app tracks how long I'm doing anapanasati, and the idea
Now
is.
you're making sense. Okay,
Okay.
let's stay with making sense. Okay, let's
Okay.
not use programs. The app is
Yeah.
tracking anapanasati. That's not possible.
It's tracking the
Are
time
you
that
put are you putting a band around your chest and hooking that to the cell phone so that as you're breathing in and out, the cell phone is tracking the breathing?
It's tracking the time that I am aware that I'm doing anapanasati. Okay, I'll just stop saying that. It's tracking the time that I'm aware of my breath. And
How
so,
can the cell phone do that?
well, I'll tell you. So when I decided that I'm going to do it, I push it, it starts tracking.
Uh-huh.
Then here's the game part. So if I ever realize that I'm not paying attention to the breath, then I stop it and I delete that time. So that time goes away. It's a game. But at any time I can bank the time. It's hard to explain unless you've seen the app, but basically all it does is it tracks the time that I am doing any activity. So
Oh,
if it's been tracking for 30 minutes and then I lose track of the breath, then then once I realize that, it's like, oh crap, that 30 minutes is gone now. But if after 30 minutes I've said, oh, I've been doing it for the last 30 minutes, I can stop it and then start it again. And so then I actually keep that time. The point is I acquire the time and it's, yeah, so I build up the time, but I have to be very careful that I don't lose track of when I'm doing it and when I'm not doing it. As a result, I've been able to do it most of the day for the last week or so. I've tried the
okay.
mindfulness bells. This works better for me.
All right. Okay. All right. It sounded to me for a while like another student that I've had who seems to think that the amount of time that he spends in what he calls meditation, which is basically just formally sitting or sitting in some posture and doing whatever the hell he wants to do, but he's keeping track of how many hours he sits not doing anapanasati. What
Uh-huh.
he is in fact doing is that he doesn't like the fact that his mind wanders away.
Yeah. No.
None of the
That's,
students like the fact that the mind wanders away. So instead of watching for the mind wandering away, he just lets it wander away. But he's keeping on his cell phone good track of how much time he lets his mind wander away.
no, that's not what I'm doing.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, just trying to.
I just basically, I've tried mindfulness bells and a bunch of different things. And this to me seems to be working because it's a very strict standard that I have to throw away any time that I'm not mindful, basically. I mean, it's hard to, maybe
I
it
don't
makes,
understand. Yeah, you said that before, and that just does not make any sense to me.
well,
You
if you,
cannot throw time away. You cannot even grab a hold of it and squeeze it. How in the world can you throw
okay.
it? I
I
don't
mean,
understand that.
well, I mean, if you see the app, you'll understand, I think. So,
Well, when you say throw the time away as opposed to keeping some time and not throwing that
yeah.
away, that's the time that this other guy that I was talking about would say that that was good and valuable and he was getting some advantage out of it.
No.
Okay,
Okay. So,
I don't see the advantage of your phone app yet.
okay. So, okay. Well, could you just Google the app so you have a screenshot so when I describe it, it makes more sense? So it's
All
called,
right, I'm going to open my cell phone and go to Play Store
uh-huh.
to Google Play.
Oh, I don't know if they have it on, this is on iPhone. I don't know if they have it for Android. Hold on. They may.
And what's the name of the app?
Hours. Just HOURS, like the time, hours.
Okay, and I have hours, minute, time calculator. I guess we could just go ahead and try that one and see what it has. It says hours, minutes, time calculator.
I don't think that's the same thing. Let me see if they have it on Android.
And then I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bunches and bunches. They look like calendar apps, keeping track of time,
Oh,
which is probably as anti-Buddhist as you could get for an application.
well, anyway, basically, it doesn't look like they have it on Android. It's just, I've tried a bunch of these things for work stuff. But the idea is that whenever I'm being mindful, I turn it on. And if I've been mindful for like, say, 15 minutes and I've been, um, if I've had breath and awareness and, I'm aware of what I'm doing for like, say, 10 minutes and I realize that, and I say, okay, good job. And then I just,
Are you using this application while you're in sitting posture?
no, this is during the
This
day.
is a formal application. Well,
So when
so you're saying that what you're doing then is on some sort of regular basis or something, you decide to do anapanasati with what you're doing, you turn on the application, and then you do anapanasati instead of what you would normally be doing for 20 or 30 minutes. And you're doing this how many times a day? 8, 10 times a day? The reason I'm asking it like this is because that's not
I, I do it all
It's
day.
not the intention of the meditation, as far as I can tell. And so I'm really confused about what your intentions are and why you're using a timing application or any of that kind of stuff.
So
I'm really confused.
the goal is to do it all day. The goal is to get used to paying attention to the breath all day. It's an alternative to using a mindfulness bell. So
All day. That's the word that's problematic.
okay. So I thought that you suggested to be mindful of breathing all day.
No. I said set a timer, and when the timer goes off, you practice Anapanasati for 8, 10 breaths or so, and then let it go back to normal.
Okay.
You see, you're making the same mistake that almost everyone makes
Uh-huh.
by using the word everyone or all the time. Okay? The skill that needs to be developed is the skill of sati. That's why they call it anapanasati.
Uh-huh.
Okay? What is the skill of sati? Is to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So when the mind wanders away, you remember that the mind has wandered away and never mind start again. Going back to the bell going off on a regular basis and then you take 10 breaths sounds like it's a very useful project.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is that when you turn this cell phone on and off, or you turn the application on the cell phone on and off, and so it can only record what you're turning on and off with your own finger, right? That you're the one, in other words, the cell phone is not connected to the body in any way that's monitoring any bodily functions at all. Is that right? It's not breath. It's not measuring breath. It's not measuring galvanomic. It's not doing blood pressures or blood pulses or anything like that. There's no measuring equipment with this application. Is that correct?
That's right.
That means that you're turning it on and you're turning it off when you want to.
Yeah.
So if you're turning it on and turning it off, then never mind when you turn it on. When you turn it off, that's kind of a subjective thing, and then the cell phone records something. Is that right? Like recording how long it was between when you turned it on and when you turned it off.
Yeah. For example,
Okay.
if
All right.
if it starts timing, so one of the things is if I grasp something without mindfulness, then that so
if you grasp something without mindfulness, and without mindfulness, you cannot turn off the cell phone. You can only turn the cell phone off with mindfulness.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to point out to you.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I usually will know if, I just went through that door and I grabbed the doorknob and I forgot. And so then if that happens, then I just turn off the timer and I get rid of that past time since the last one, and then I start the timer again.
Guess what? You do not need the timer. What you need to do is note. And you're saying that you're using the cell phone and the timer to make a note of something, as if later that note will be of value, because the value of the cell phone is to store things for later reference.
Yeah, but the value of the cell phone...
all of this practice is done in the moment. Anything that cell phone records 1 second after you've finished with it is of no value now. And in fact, it's got a problem with it. And that problem is going back to the cell phone and either being angry at yourself or congratulating yourself for something that happened in the past.
Yeah, I mean...
What we're really working on is being here now in the present. And I understand that you're looking for ways of helping you to do that. But the cell phone by itself, because you turn it off or you turn it on, I see no value in that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the value is that it keeps my intention on being on being mindful, and that it's basically just to set the intention, and then, so then, yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe.
I know. You said
Well,
it
no,
was a game. It's a mind game. All
yeah,
right,
it's
I understand
because
that.
it's not about tracking time so much as it's about setting the conscious intention to be mindful. That's more what it's
Excellent.
about.
I congratulate you on that.
So
That's the point. But
it's
the
not
way
like,
you're using the cell phone, I don't see the cell phone of being any value at the for the end of being mindful.
well, when I set mindfulness bells, basically between the bells, I completely forget about it. Whereas when I do this, I'm usually aware if the timer is running or not. And I'll usually go for like 20 minutes and then I'll say, okay, I'm still mindful. I haven't grasped anything without realizing it. So then I count that time and then I start the timer over again. When I say start the time over, it's just click of a button. I say, yep, I'm still doing good. And I click it again and I start. And then if it's like 20 minutes and I grasp something without realizing that I'm grasping it, then usually like 20 seconds later, I'm like, oh man, how did I get through that door without going through that conscious process? And I say, oops. And then, so then I just kind of say, I didn't bank that since that last one, so I just don't count that. It basically lets me know when I'm being conscious of it or not. I made a game out of it. To me, it makes it
Okay.
easier.
Okay. All right. Um, I don't think that I'll be recommending these kind of applications to any of the other students, but if you find it valuable for yourself,
Yeah.
then go for it.
Yeah. Well, I'll stick with it and I'll let you know if I if I continue to like it.
All right. Okay.
So, okay, but just for clarity, so because you'd mentioned a few different kind of mindfulness techniques. I think I've told you this before. Have had a lot of problems with kind of obsessive thoughts, but like diagnosed. So like obsessive compulsive disorder. And so this is why.
The reason I'm laughing is because that sounds like the cell phone you're using.
It's not. It's not. Anyway, um, but my point is that this is why I'm putting effort into mindfulness during the day, and it's shown a lot of results for me just
Yes,
since I
that's
started
good to hear.
meditating. Yeah, and I've also realized that when I put a big effort into mindfulness during the day and keeping track of my thoughts during the day, then it makes meditating a lot easier too. So this is kind of the reason that I'm so interested in mindfulness during the day. It's because of that. It's because more than the average person, if I fail to be mindful for like, a couple hours, I end up in some weird place I don't want to be. So this is kind of the reason. So when you, so, because you've mentioned a few different, um, things, a few different kind of tricks. One of them is the grasping thing. One of them, you called it tracking, I think, which is maybe tracking. I don't remember the name you used, but to be able to follow a sequence of thoughts, to know like this led to this, led to this.
Yes, uh-huh.
At the moment, I'm not doing that because I don't want to overwhelm myself because it's hard enough to just remember to be mindful at all. And that one's a little harder. But, and then the other thing that you mentioned is the breathing. But maybe I misunderstood the breathing one because you're telling me that I shouldn't try to be aware of breathing throughout the day, only in kind of short spurts. Is that right?
Well, again, the issue is the sati.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the beginning of the practice of Buddha Dhamma, we practice Anapanasati at the point of just the breath, okay? So we start with just the breath, the in breath, the out breath, whether it's a long breath or a short breath. When we say long and short breath, we're not meaning the word long and short by duration, but rather the long breath is how much. In fact, the short breath winds up being the one that gets really, really long, like when you're down to breathing only 1 or 2 breaths a minute.
Okay.
All right, so it's not talking about time duration, it's talking more about body movement. But in that sense, you can also think of it as watching the breath while you're controlling the breath, as opposed to watching the breath as you're losing or not controlling the breath, because it will go back to normal. The part of the brain that controls the breath when it's watching and controlling the breath is the frontal cortex.
Okay.
But the normal place where the breathing is occurring is in the anterior cortex, almost down at the brain stem, down in the back, down there where the heartbeat is controlled. And it's autonomous, and it's part of the, let us call it the programming of the self-preservation instinct. In other words, if you stop breathing, you'll die. And so that part of the body is keeping that breathing going. But when you think about it, you bring it up to the frontal cortex, and you control the breath. So we want to move back and forth between the controlled breath and the normal breathing that's not so controlled.
Okay.
Now, when the breathing is normal and not controlled, that means that the anterior cortex is doing all kinds of stuff that keeps one of the things that the neuropsychologists are finding out is that blood pressure and heart rate and other things like that is really, really erratic. But in the old days, with the old ways of doing medical science, like with the sphygmometer or the blood pressure machine that gives a reading of blood pressure, in fact, every time the heart beats, the pressure is going to be different. That machine assumes that the blood pressure is steady from the time that you pump it up until the time that it all lets out, and that 1 or so minute time period is going to measure the blood pressure for that time period, or in fact it doesn't measure that at all. By putting EKG, much more modern equipment, we begin to see that the blood pressure is actually all over the place. That this systolic and that diastolic and this systolic are different from the last systolic, and this diastolic is different than the last one. So if something goes like this, you can see, in fact, it goes at a sawtooth like that, and it can go up and then it can go down. What these guys have done when we're looking at the blood pressure over a short period of time, let us say 5 to 10 seconds, is to recognize that when we take the breath consciously and slow down the breathing, it actually starts to regulate the blood pressure and the heart rate.
Okay.
Now that's new information that's just been discovered and put on YouTube. In the old days, I used to worry, why didn't the Buddha ever talk about blood rate or heart rate? Why is he only talking about breathing? The answer is because the breathing can be controlled. The heart rate is going to always be controlled only secondarily. Okay? That you can do things that will drive up your heart rate. You can do things to drive down your heart rate, but you cannot drive it up and drive it down directly. But you can with the breath. And in fact, how are you going to, if you do manage to regulate or change the heart rate or the blood pressure indirectly, the easiest and the best way to do that is by working with the breath, that the breath and the heart rate are directly tied together. So we're only looking for things for the short term. And what is that? The skill that we're actually developing is to wrestle control away from the reptilian brain and bring it to the frontal cortex. That's the job to do. We start with the breath doing that. We wrestle control of the breath away from the reptilian brain and we put it into the frontal cortex. And we do that over and over and over again until we begin to get the habit of it. If you grab hold of the brain, the breath and take it away from the reptilian brain and hold it for long periods of time in the frontal cortex, you're not developing the skill of sati.
Mm-hmm.
The skill of sati is to remember to come back and to come back and to come back and to come back.
Okay.
That's the skill that we're developing. It's the skill to come back. But Westerners think that means all the time. Oh no, it does not mean all the time. Most of the time you're going to be spending doing your normal day's duties.
Okay.
But from time to time you're going to remember to come back to the breath, 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 because that's how life actually happens. In other words, if you're, it's possible to do it this way, but normally it doesn't. That you're sitting on your porch with the thought, if somebody comes to have an argument with me, I'm going to be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thought, if somebody comes to have an argument with me, I'm going to be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody comes to have the argument later, but we're not thinking about it now. We're not thinking about it. And so when somebody comes to contact me to argue with me, what do? I jump right into the argument, even though I've been trying to remember to not. Why? Because I don't have the sati developed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what sati is going to do is sati is going to then, at the right time, throughout the day, into the future, you're going to have sati to be developed just at the right time so that we don't do the automatic thing. The automatic thing would be when somebody comes to argue with me, I'm going to argue back with him.
Mm-hmm.
The mindful thing to do when somebody comes to argue is smile.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to have that strong sati to remember. In other words, when stress comes in its normal way, then the habit is to take on that stress because that's the habit of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so by developing sati of coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back, that means that when that time comes, that the mind will come back. So
Okay.
we start like this. We start in the sense of the breath.
Mm-hmm.
The breath we start with because it's the most obvious thing that the human body is doing when it's sitting still and quiet. When we go into seclusion, about the only or the biggest thing that we have going on is breathing. That's why we start with the in-breath and the out-breath. Eventually that leads us to an investigation of the body. During that investigation of the body time, we also begin to investigate the mind. We investigate the mind in the sense of, can the mind remember to come back? Is the mind focused? Can we see what's on the inside of the mind and on the outside of the mind?
So when you say come back, do you mean
To remember.
So it's,
That's what I mean. When I say come back, that means remember. Come back to the present moment, basically.
so
In the first, we come back to the breath. Eventually, or very soon, we come back to the body and the breath. Eventually, we come back to the body, the breath, and the mind. By then, we've got good control over the mind's objects. So we put mind's objects that we want to have. We have the ability to apply and sustain. Once we have the ability to apply the mind and sustain the mind, the next thing that we do is we then develop sati for feeling. So now we've got the 4 foundations of mindfulness all covered there. So that we're going to be mindful of feeling, mindful of the body, mindful of the mind, and mindful of the mind's objects. Eventually, the mind's objects that we're going to be mindful of, like the 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, and suffering and no suffering, that's a higher thing to become aware of, or in the sense of sati. Eventually, it goes to what we call satipanya. In that case, the sati is to remember to always do the right thing, always do the wise thing, satipanya. We start at the beginning with the breath because the breath is the easiest. If I started students on satipanya, they'd never get anywhere. We have to start with something that we can use.
Okay.
Okay? But in fact, we're going to be going for all 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the
Okay.
body is one of them.
I see. Interesting. Okay, so all right. So okay, so the goal isn't to be aware of the breath all day long. The goal is to, when I am not being mindful, when I'm kind of getting
Remember,
lost in thought, or kind of not connected to the present really, to then realize that and then become aware of the breath for, say, a few minutes or something like that.
mm-hmm.
And
With the
then,
idea that because we start back with the breathing again, there's going to be residual here-nowness that's going to slowly fade away. Very soon again, we have sati reoccur. We come back to the breath, we take a few deep breaths, we come to the here now, and we forget all about it.
I see. So, okay, so the
And
goal
let things
is,
go back to normal.
I see.
And
So the
then we
goal,
remember again, and we start it all again, and we come back again.
so the goal isn't to make a habit of automatically having the breath and awareness so much as it's to use the breath as kind of a tool to bring you back to the present moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
To be here now. If there is a goal, the goal is to be here now,
Okay.
which is not
Okay.
much of a goal.
Well, I wish that were true. It's hard. Okay.
Well, I mean, just philosophically, look at it this way. What was Donald Trump's goal?
God knows.
Okay, so that's it. Our goal is to be here now, to
Hmm.
remember to be here now. Sati.
Okay.
Okay, this is why the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has expanded the Trilokana, which I don't talk about very much, but this is a good time to talk about it. Instead of just the Trilokana, he actually has I don't know the Pali word for 6. Sorry about that. I think it's hoke. But in any case, there's 6 of them. Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, Tatatha, Sunatta, Atammayata. Those are the 6. Let me give them to you again. Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, Tatatha, Sunatta, and Atammayata. So, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, we should talk a lot about that, and we do generally all the time. Tatatha is the word for be here now in the Pali language. The
Hmm.
Buddha even called himself Tatatha,
Hmm.
which is the one who has come to the now.
Hmm.
Come to thusness, come to this present moment. Okay, so that's the goal, is to be here now.
Hmm.
To be here now means also that we're not stuck in the past, nor are we stuck in the future, nor are we stuck in doubt, nor are we stuck in wanting things that we don't have. In other words, be here now, we're free from the hindrances, which you
Hmm.
mentioned, lost in thought.
Hmm.
Okay, so when the mind is free from the hindrances, that's automatically here now. Be here now. You're in the present moment.
Okay.
This is also the quality of having the mind fit for work. Because when the mind is distracted, filled with doubt, filled with restlessness or remorse, then it's not fit for work. But when the mind is here now, then it's fit for work. What work do we want to do? The investigation of here now, the
Hmm.
investigation of what's going on. And we need a mind that's fit for work, which means a mind that's here now.
Okay.
in all four respects: body, feeling, mind, and mind objects.
So, so body, I get that. That's like breath. What are my hands doing? That kind of thing. Um, body feeling, that's like Vedana, right? That's kind of like
They do,
good or,
right.
okay.
Which
Um,
boils down to I like it, I don't like it, or I'm not sure if I like it or not.
hmm And then what were the other two? Mind, object, and what was the last one?
Mind and mental objects and mind.
Okay, what's the
Okay?
difference between
Mind is
those?
fire, mental objects is air. Like the clouds of the air, they just float right by.
Okay, mental, okay.
Okay? But mind, like fire, is power. It is energy. It's dynamic. And it is destructive, and it's also creative. That's the mind. That's why it's listed as fire. Emotions have always been associated with water, and the body being a solid object is solid. So the original elements of ancient times: air, fire, water, and earth, or earth, water, fire, and air.
hmm
Those are the four. And in the Satipatthana, that means that we associate those four primary elements of the universe as what also exists inside the body.
hmm Okay. So,
So that's why we use that. But we practice Anapanasati for the fulfillment of the four foundations of mindfulness. So that when we have the four foundations of mindfulness, the mind is on fire, it's fit for work, it's able to manage and control the feelings.
hmm
But learning how to control the feelings will come a little later. In the beginning, we need to learn how to control the breath.
okay. So, all right. So, mind objects, I get that, and I guess the tracking exercise that you mentioned before would be an example of that, trying to see what thought leads to what thought leads to what thought, right? And I understand the Vedana, so that would be the water, right?
Mm.
So the air are the mind objects. I guess the earth is the body,
Yes.
and then the fire. So this is the one I don't really understand in the sense that I understand what it means to be aware of those other three. What does it mean to be aware of the mind, other than
All
to be
right.
aware of mind
When your
objects?
mind wandered away from the breath
Uh huh.
and sati comes in,
Uh huh.
and you understand or you recognize or you can see or understand somehow that the mind is no longer watching the breath,
hmm
that is experiencing the mind.
I
So
see.
right in the beginning, you can see, is the mind on its topic or is it not on topic?
So okay, so it's kind of like a meta. It's kind of like rather than just the objects themselves, it's kind of like a bird's eye view of what's going on, maybe.
You can think of it like that.
Okay, that
Okay.
makes sense to me. Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay,
In
cool.
philosophy, they talk about it as a meta object. It's not the object itself, it's the meta object, okay? And so, as the meta object, you're watching the mind, but the mind is watching the mind. And
Yeah,
so it's actually at two different levels.
gotcha.
So in the beginning, the mind starts to watch in the sense of, is it watching the breath or is it not watching the breath? And the students don't like to see that even though they gave the job of the mind to watch the breath, it can't do it. It's going to get distracted.
hmm
And students don't like that.
Yeah.
So the first thing that has to be changed, the first change of attitude, is to change that not liking to liking.
Okay.
All right, so we begin to work on the feelings, but we do it through the mind.
hmm
Okay, and so we can say things like, aha, I caught you again.
Okay.
And so we begin to generate joy, success, satisfaction. When we recognize that the mind has wandered away from the breath, we start there with satisfaction.
hmm
Why? Because normally people they become dissatisfied and unhappy that the mind has wandered away from the breath. That's the normal state. So we have to change that mind state from I like it or from I don't like it to I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in fact something magical has happened. Something magnificent has happened. What? Before the mind had wandered away from the breath and you didn't know it. You were lost, literally, lost in thought. But something happened and you became aware that you were lost in thought.
Yeah.
That's the sati. That mindfulness to recognize that you're not doing what you wanted to do. Okay, and that's when people get unhappy, is when they recognize that the mind is not what they want. And so now the next thing is that I don't like it that the mind has wandered away. So now they're doing even worse kinds of things, and they're still not really in the state of sati.
Mm-hmm.
To be really in the state of sati, you need to not only recognize that the mind has wandered away, but change that mind state into, oh, I caught it. Oh, this is wonderful. Oh, I've come from being an ordinary, regular, low-class human being into being someone who is capable of mindfulness right now. And you just, in fact, you changed from being an animal into being a human.
Okay.
So congratulate yourself for making a marvelous change in evolution. That you're no longer on automatic. Now you're beginning to be mindful. Yeah. And so now we develop joy through satisfaction. In fact, this is the time to develop the power. The word in Pali is idiyapada.
Mm-hmm.
The word pada actually is the same word that we use for like pedal. It means footing.
Yeah.
So the base of power. The basis of power, exactly what we're talking about here. Sati. The ability to keep coming back over and over again. That's the concentration we're talking about, not steady state. Keeping the mind focused like that is not what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about, is keep coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. That's what it means to be unremitting.
I got you.
An example of that is like a drum. And this is a drum head, or this is a drum head, and this is some drum mallet. Is this the right way to bang a drum? Is this how you play a drum?
No.
This is the way people think that they should meditate.
Uh-huh.
But how do you bang a drum?
Yeah.
Come back, come back, come back, come back. This going off is going back into the world of delusion. This is the sati. Okay? The coming is the sati.
Yeah.
Okay? And when it hits, that's the waking up part. So you need to keep waking up and keep waking up over and over and over again. And the benefit of that waking up, in fact, the sound of the drum is the sound of success, the sound of joy, the sound of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can come back, I can come back, I can come back, I can do it, I can chug, I can chug, I can chug, I can keep coming back over and over and over again. So that begins to develop idiyapada.
I see.
Those are the bases of power. What is the power? The power is not the power of magic. It's not a magical power in the sense of diving into the earth and swimming in the earth, walking on waters, walking through walls, clairvoyance, clairaudience, those kind of magical things. No, this is different. This is real power, not magical power. Mm-hmm. What are the real powers? The power of wealth, the power of prosperity, the power of success, the power of the lion's roar, the power of the Buddha. Okay, this is the real power, the power of success. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you feel successful. When the mind wanders away, you keep wanting to come back to success. You see, one of the things that you're doing is that you're giving too much power to that cell phone in this application, trying to get your good feelings or benefit out of the cell phone because of what it's doing, instead of getting that good good feeling right now. So that's what you need to start doing is that every time you remember to watch the breath, you want to do it as joyfully as you can. Oh, wow, this is so good. To be away from it all. Okay? This is the way of looking at it. So just taking 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 short, deep breaths is enough to bring that joy, to come back to the present moment, to reinvigorate yourself, to become vital again.
Mm-hmm.
And then you let it go back to normal, and then you remember again, and you come back, and you bring it, and you get it all good again. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit is twofold. One is that you're enjoying this present moment, which is about the best that you'll ever be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're 60 or whether you've been practicing this for 15 or 20 or 100 years, or whether they call you a Buddha or whatever labels you put on yourself, the best thing that can happen is the enjoyment of taking a deep breath and just being here now with no problems.
Mm-hmm.
Completely free from all troubles, all worries, everything. That's what we mean by the end of suffering. It doesn't mean that you're going to have magic in your life, or you're going to dive into the earth and swim in it, or walk on water. That's not the magic that we're looking for, or not the power that we're looking for. We're looking for the power of being successful right now, the power of being prosperous right now. Completely satisfied with how things are. In fact, satiated with things. So it's always in the moment. So you generate the joy for this moment. I like it. And then we let things go back to normal, and then we remember again, and we come back. And we keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And every time you come back, you give yourself that little goose of joy. That's the right way to practice. Don't think about it in the sense of long-term duration. That's the normal way of thinking about it in the sense of using terms like all the time. There's no such thing as all the time. Okay, what there is the ability to come back and come back and come back and come back and come back. That's what we're looking for. The ability to come back. That's the skill of sati. And we want to be able to practice it really often so that when we need it most, and when it's most likely to not come, it'll still come anyway because we're developing the habit of it. A really clear example of when it's really hard to come back to this present moment is that you're tooling down the road, you're driving the car, and all of a sudden you see a red light and you hear the siren and the cop is stopping you. Now that's the time that you need sati. That's the time you need it. And that's the time that you're most unlikely to have it.
Yeah.
All right? So that's the way that we're looking for. That we're looking for development of the habit that can keep coming back so that we'll make sure that it comes back at the right time. So that's what we mean by that fourth one, that Tatatha. Eventually we become to understand that everything is empty. That's Sunatta. Everything is empty. There is no meaning or purpose or value to anything other than what we think so in the mind. In other words, gold doesn't actually have any intrinsic value. And neither does paper money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has no real value. They say, well, paper money should be backed with gold. Yeah, but what's gold backed with? It's not backed with anything. It's empty too. It has no value except what people magically think it is. But really, gold has no value. It just is.
Yeah.
All right. So when we recognize that all the things that are of value is because I place that value on it. And that value is placed on it with society, with society's rules. We all pick up all of those rules when we're young, and then we perpetuate those rules when we're old. One of the rules is that the gold has value. But we also have a lot of other things like racism and think that holding racism, that us being white guys, we're better off than others.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as you can see in politics, when they're beginning to slowly wake up to the fact that white people do not have privilege,
Mm-hmm.
and there's being a whole lot of trouble with that. Okay, not white people, but white men. It's really white men, because right now they're being slapped on both sides, one side by women and the other side by all of the other people who are not white. And this is a big problem in the United States, this racism, this chauvinism, and it's all been brought up in politics. And you can see how much misery and suffering there is on all sides of that, because they hold value in things. And they're not in the moment. They're always thinking about what happened in the past, and then they're trying to get revenge for it in the future. If people can stay in the here now, things are really okay. It's only when we spend time in the past and in the future, or when we're spending times attached to things, giving it value, when it really doesn't have any value.
Mm-hmm.
The last one point on that is Atammayata, which means I'm not going to mess with that stuff anymore. Okay, actually, you know the word Mara, or Maya.
Yeah.
Okay. The magical definition of that word is that it's the devil. A less magical word is that it's the world. A more concise way of looking at it is Mara is the second noble truth.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mara has 3 daughters. The Buddha talked about the 3 daughters of Mara. What are they? Lobha, Moha, Dosa. Wanting things you don't have, putting up with things that are disagreeable to put up with,
Mm-hmm.
and the ignorance and delusion of thinking that we know what's best, when in fact we don't.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so as we're little children, that's where the original ignorance started. And how that original ignorance started is we believed what we were told.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were told by people who were adults, but they believed those things from the time that they were children. And so, actually, human race is not a human race of adults. It's a human race of children.
Mm-hmm.
That, in fact, the psychologists have noticed that in fact, they look at the European culture as being more mature than the American culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that they look at other cultures, even though the people themselves may be younger demographically, the mindset of the Americans is immature.
Yeah. Some more than others, I think.
Some more than others, exactly. We're talking about it on a cultural basis, right? So the whole idea with Atammayata is to figure out what things are worth messing with and what things are not worth messing with. So means not, tam is work. Atam means not working or not doing. Mara. I'm not going to mess with Mara anymore. I'm not going to mess with, and the way that that's used, by the way, in Thailand here is they'll think of a particular organization or a particular person or a particular event or let us say a friend you know or something like that. Instead of having arguments with them, you just ignore that person completely. That's a way of doing Atammayata. I don't want to mess with that. I'm not going to mess with that stuff anymore. But when we recognize that what's worthy, really worthy of not messing with anymore, is all the things that we used to think were valuable but are in fact empty, then you back up one more step and you recognize that I'm not going to mess with all the things that I used to mess with that were in the past and in the future. I want to stay here now, because in the here now, there is not much to mess with. It's just to enjoy. To enjoy the here now. So, this is what we're wanting to do, is we're wanting to develop a practice that continues to come back to the here now on a regular basis. Unremitting mindfulness. In fact, that term, unremitting mindfulness, is a factor of enlightenment, the Sambhojana. So we practice Anapanasati for the fulfillment of the Satipatthana, and then we practice Satipatthana for the fulfillment of the 7 factors of enlightenment. and we
Okay.
fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment for knowledge and deliverance. The
Mhm.
knowledge and deliverance and the 7 factors of enlightenment also can be wrapped up with the understanding of the Four Noble Truths.
Mhm.
Really deep level understanding of the Four Noble Truths. As
Mhm.
opposed to, I know that it's always considered introductory Buddhism, that this is what the Buddha taught. But really, that's only at an intellectual level. We really need to get down to understanding the nature of suffering. What is it? How do we create it? And how can we stop creating it? The
Okay.
easy answer is that we create it in the mind, we create it in the past, and we create it in the future, and how we stop it is by coming to the present moment.
Mhm.
Over and over again, and yet the entire society that we live in is a society built on past and future. An example of the past is look at all the laws that have been put on the books,
Mhm.
and how many of them are no longer appropriate. I think my favorite one is there's a book on the state record in South Carolina. They have a state law that men have to carry by law a weapon, a gun, on Sundays.
Uh huh.
It's a South Carolina law, never been repealed. They snicker at it, but they don't repeal the law. Why was that law enacted? Well, back when everybody was Christians and everybody went to Sunday school and church on Sundays, they didn't carry their weapons with them. That was when the Indians would attack.
Uh huh.
Because remember, South Carolina had Indians too. But way back then, long before the United States was a state, or there was a United States. There was just North and South Carolinas and that kind of stuff. So at that level, we make laws, and then those laws stay on the books, but they get old, they rot, they're no longer useful, and yet we require people to abide by laws. And that the current thing that's happening, or the future, is that let us say that the SEC or legislature in America passes a new regulation for Wall Street. As soon as that, in fact, while that law is being written down, enacted, and passed, the Wall Streeters are already looking for ways to get around that law.
Yeah.
Already looking for the loopholes in it. By the time the law comes in, they're ready for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the people who make those laws put in loopholes intentionally because they get paid to put in loopholes.
Right, okay, so that's also the case, is that it's a crooked operation. In that regard, we don't need to abide by those rules and laws. And we can see that they were ill-conceived in the first place, and then they rot once they're put into position.
Mm-hmm.
There's just things out of the past. But if we hold the rules of the law of suffering and no suffering, that's always done in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Making our choices about what's right to do based upon what's going to cause suffering. And so now we begin to be much more wisdom oriented. That's why eventually anapanasati winds up being satipanya, to remember to be wise, to remember to be on alert for suffering so that it can be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to avoid it is by being in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that is if you've got an old enemy and all of a sudden you wind up being in the same small location with that person. If you present yourself in this present moment, then everything is good. But if you present yourself as to what that situation was in the past, you're only going to start the old argument up again, and here comes suffering.
Yeah.
So we have to forget the past. Just forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Be like a dog. You know, if you punish a dog, in fact, the really funny one is that we're getting the stuff out to give the dog a bath. The dog knows that the bath time is coming, and so he scoots right off. He can see that stuff. But because we're not getting it out or anything, it's just sitting there, the dog's going to forget about it. 5 minutes later, the dog comes back, and then you give him a bath. There's no reason to chase the dog down when you want to give him a bath. He'll forget.
Yeah.
You don't have to chase him. He'll forget all about it.
Yeah.
Same thing is true. You can spank a dog or whip a dog because you're unhappy or upset. And if you whip a human, that human's going to remember, and he's going to hold that grudge against you. But a dog's going to forget all about it. 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, he's back licking your hand and being good, because their short-term memory is, let us say, functional.
Uh-huh.
Where the memory of humans is painful.
Yeah.
Keeps us living in the past, keeps us trying to do things that no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to generate it again. This is one of the, there is in fact a Zen koan, a koan.
Yeah.
The question is, does a dog have Buddha nature?
Yeah, I heard this.
Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't.
The answer is moo. The answer is both. The dog has both Buddha nature and not Buddha nature. Here's why. Is that the dog has the capability of most of the time, most of the dogs are in the present moment. They're here now.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are not. They're stuck in the past, they're stuck in the future. They're stuck in misery. But the way that the dogs are not Buddhas is because they have no capability of managing their feelings. In other words, their instincts, they're always instinctual. Mm-hmm. Where humans have the capability of coming out of our instincts and coming to a higher nature.
Okay.
All right? So, that's the twin job, then, of the human to become the Buddha, is one, to be here now, and the two is to overcome the primitive nature, our instincts. And we know that there's four instincts. The four instincts is self-preservation instinct, procreation, nesting instinct, and territorial instinct. Mm-hmm. These four instincts wind up being the four modes of clinging. Mm-hmm. And it also winds up being the four symbols for the release of suffering and the attributes of an arahat. The attributes of an arahat is one who has overcome these four modes of clinging, because he's overcome the instincts. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are these four symbols of the arahat? One is that he no longer carries a weapon. He goes around defenseless. All right, that's actually the procreation or the power instinct. We think of procreation only as making babies, but in fact the procreation instinct also makes tools, makes weapons, makes axes and spears and that kind of stuff, all the way up to cell phones. Mm-hmm. Okay, that comes out of that instinct. So that's weapons. We drop our weapons. The second one is that we fill in the trench. Now, the trench is like a wall. It shows the boundaries. That this is my place and that over there is not my place. This is safe place. Over there is dangerous. These are my people. Those people over there are bad people. These are good people here. Therefore, we want protection from them. This is the trench. Also, we can be called a moat. But it's a boundary. It's saying, don't cross that moat. Don't cross that trench. Don't. Or another word for it is rampart.
Yeah.
Okay, with the spikes and all of that. So we no longer have that kind of protection. The third one is to give up the banner. What is the banner? The banner is identification with other organizations. For instance, another word for banner would be the word flag or icon or corporate symbol. Okay, so Christian flags, American flags, Democratic donkeys, Republican elephants, the Union Jack, skull and bones, all of these are symbols. Even sport teams have symbols. Yeah. Heraldries. In fact, the symbol was often put on the shield that the warrior carried. So the warrior has both the weapon and also the protection of the shield, which is the protection of the organization, which means you have to belong to something. Like they talk about it in a good sense, and belonging to something bigger than you are.
Yeah.
Okay, to join, become patriotic. Help us because we're suffering, and help us by making us feel good, and our intention to feel good is to make those people suffer. So, when we drop all of our banners, we're no longer associated with anything. Only then will you have freedom. So long as you associate with another organization, you will be associating with forms of suffering. They'll make you suffer until you join, and then they'll make you suffer by making others suffer, because that's their intention. And you look at politics. Yeah. We win, you lose. All right? And the better way of looking at politics is look at everybody who's in politics. There's such an entertainment. It's a big joke. Yeah. It's like Washington, D.C. is nothing but a big Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And why can we do it like that? Is because we hold no banners. We don't take sides. Chung Tzu had a work where he talks about it like this. It's an entire poem, but the poem ends in when the foot is right. No, when the shoe is right, when the shoe fits, the foot is forgotten. That's the right way of saying. When the shoe fits, the foot is forgotten. And when the heart is right, for and against are forgotten. Okay. In other words, when our heart is right, we don't take sides. Okay. We don't carry the banner. The fourth one, and by the way, you can see how this banner and the trench are two different versions of the nesting instinct and the territorial instinct. The weapons is the procreation instinct. Now we talk about the fourth one, which is the barring of the door. We unbolt the door. Our home. We open the heart. We're no longer having to protect anything. We don't hold value in what's inside. In other words, we're not trying to hide anything. We're not keeping any secrets. We're able to be completely open and honest with everything. And this is how we are able to manage these four instincts that the dog can't manage. Doesn't know anything about how to manage them. They're just stuck in it. It's their programming. We have the ability to change our program. Okay, and the program that we're going to change are the things that are the four modes of clinging. And so when we stop with the four modes of clinging, which means we stop operating instinctually and start operating from a higher mind, then we can eliminate suffering. So if there is a goal, the goal is to be here now. Over and over and over and over and over again, to be here now. And so this another goal you could think of it is to remember to be here now. So that's the goal. Not to maintain the ability to watch the breath for a long period of time, because what likely happen is you're watching the breath and you're watching the breath, and the boss comes in your office. What's going to happen? You'll immediately stop breathing. You won't be watching the breath. You'll be watching what's going to happen with the boss. Okay, and so steady state of watching the breath, watching the breath, watching the breath all the time doesn't have near as much value as the ability to come back and to come back and to come back and to come back. That word, that one little word, unremitting. That pounding, that constant coming back to it, that's the real value. So remember that drum. That this is not the right way to play the drum. Okay? And I think that with the application, that what you're using the application for is to say, how long can I do this? And I'm wanting to make sure that, oh no, the sati comes right when you want to grasp the doorknob,
Mm-hmm.
to grasp it with mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
or to grasp whatever object, that the mindfulness comes before.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Does this give you a different perspective of how you're going to use that application? I hope so.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to follow the breath all day because that's what I've been doing.
Okay.
I'm still going
Not
to play with the
necessary.
app. I still want to play with the app because I like
No
it better
problem.
than the
I
bells.
can't, I can't, I can't give you those kind of orders. I don't even want to.
Okay.
You play with the app, but remember that the intention is to come back, to come back, to come back, to come back over and over and over again until the sati becomes unremitting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that sounds good. So,
So, how many deep breaths have you taken in the past couple of minutes?
probably like 30.
You have. You've been listening to your breath or listening to me. I don't know.
I'm so used to it, man. The last few days I've been doing breath stuff a lot.
Okay. All right. So let's go into it like this. The important quality of watching the breath, or actually to come back to the breath, is the quality of throwing the hindrances out of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That the Buddha talks about it in the sense that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, that if you recognize that no matter how obstructed it gets, I can still clean the mind out and come
Mm-hmm.
back to the point, then that's the right way to look at it. Okay, is so what happens when people begin to watch the breath for a long period of time? They begin to recognize, oh, right there in the background, yeah, I can watch the breath, but between the watching of the breath, the mind is still in operation. It's still in hindrance. It's still floating around in the past and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so you recognize that.
Yeah.
You can see that. Okay. A lot of students will ask, what about when I can watch the breath, but the hindrances are still there in the background?
But I have found that when I watch the breath, I can recognize it faster when my mind is, wandering into negative stuff, that I realize that faster, like within a couple seconds usually, as opposed to.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, that's the whole thing. All right. So what we want to do, though, is when you recognize that those thoughts are in the background, to gently bring them to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
To recognize that even though I'm watching my breath, the thoughts are still in the background. Let's watch the breath and really be here now and throw those thoughts out. That's the real intention, is to throw those thoughts out, even because they'll try to sneak in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they sneak in and you recognize that the thoughts are in the background, you can gently direct them to things that really need inspection. All right. So let us say it like this. Instead of thinking about what happened last year at a particular event, think about the Four Noble Truths instead in this
Okay.
present moment. The Four
Mm-hmm.
Noble Truths are noble truths because they're available right here, right now, every step along the way. That's part of why we call them noble truths. A lot of truth is not noble because it's temporary, in the sense that sometimes things are true and sometimes things are not true.
Mm-hmm.
And when things are true, we tend to believe that they're true for all time. But in fact, they're temporary. They're not true all the time. There's very, very few truths that are true all the time, every moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the Four Noble Truths are noble because they're true all the time.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that is suffering is always created in the mind. The suffering never comes from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the police arrest you and put you in an isolation room and come in and start to harass you with good cop, bad cop maneuvers, if you don't want to be under stress, if you know how to not be under stress, those cops cannot stress you out. If they put you in solitary confinement, which is the kind of the worst punishment that mankind knows how to put on humans. But really, what that means when they put people in solitary confinement is they let the guy's mind just eat him alive with all of his own suffering. But if you have mindfulness, if you have the ability to have a clean mind, then solitary confinement, that's like, I mean, right, it's a free meal. Yeah, what would the Buddha do if he were in solitary confinement? He'd say, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, by recognizing that means that second noble truth is always true, that always suffering is created by the individual. It never comes from the outside. And the third noble truth is that you can be free from suffering by stop doing the things that you do that causes suffering.
Okay, yeah.
And then the path is a noble path when the mind is noble. When the mind is not noble, then the path, so beginning students of the Eightfold Noble Path, beginning meditators, are not on the noble path. They're on whatever path that they are trying to figure out is the noble path. And so they're kind of on their own path. Once they figure out for sure what the Buddha was talking about, only then does the path become noble. So you have an ordinary path, and everybody's on an ordinary path. Some of them some of those ordinary paths are closer to the noble path than others. A lot of paths are nowhere near it. But once you really understand the teaching of the Buddha, then we can understand the noble path from a noble perspective. And I'll get deeper into that the next time you call, when we get really into the Four Noble Truths. Right now we're still working on getting the mind fit for the work of doing the Four Noble Truths. So in that regard, when the mind is wandering away, even though you're able to watch the breath, we're still not going to let the mind wander where it wants to wander. We're going to start pinning boundaries on the background thoughts. And the first one is to have thoughts about what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Having thoughts about the present moment. You're in fact getting some benefit of that with that cell phone application, but you could do everything that you're doing with the assistance of the cell phone without it. But you continue to play with that, and then occasionally set the cell phone down and say, can I continue to do that? Because the cell phone can actually be a good training, like the training wheels of a bicycle.
Well, that's what I don't want to. In 5 years, I don't want to be using a cell phone. I'm hoping.
Exactly. Exactly so.
I'm hoping I'll make some good habits.
Good.
All right.
Well, I think that we're on the same wavelength now. I wasn't sure about it in the beginning of our conversation, but now I can see that we're on it. Okay.
No, I mean, I like I said, I think I have a reason to invest a lot of effort into mindfulness during the day, maybe more than the average person. And that's why...
For sure, your average person is spending no time at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, like I said, I've been meditating now for about 1.5 years, and I do it for at least an hour a day, although not for the last couple of weeks. I've been doing it less for the last couple of weeks, but I've made a lot of progress when I meditate, and like my mind almost never wanders when I meditate now. But during the day, it's another story. And this is why I've been putting a lot of effort into mindfulness practices, because if I could maintain anywhere near when I'm sitting during the day, that would be amazing.
Yes, but that's not your goal. That's the important thing, is that's not your goal. That may be the excellent goal for the sitting, but when you're off the cushion, by definition, you've got work to do. And so by definition, much of your thinking is going to be done with that work, and you can't call that your normal life of doing whatever work that you're doing. It's not, let us say, appropriate for you to call that wandering mind.
Yeah.
Because it's not really wandering. You're doing work, okay?
Yeah.
And so you even want to interrupt that from time to time to come back to the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but the mind wandering I'm talking about is not helpful mind wandering.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 4 o'clock in the morning here. I think I should probably go to bed.
And the last thing that I want to say in that regard is to remind you of the quality of applied and sustained thought.
Okay.
To be able to apply the thought to a topic that you want and to keep it sustained there, just like if you were reading a book or even listening to me. You apply your mind to what I'm saying and then you listen. You keep it sustained there. All right? This is the quality of the first jhana, is the ability to apply the mind and keep it sustained there. It's not, the mind is still thinking. It's not a quiet mind. Mm-hmm. It's a thinking mind, but the thoughts are directed. Mm-hmm. So when you're reading a book, what are your thoughts directed to? It's directed to the reading of the book. Mm-hmm. And yet you know that when you're reading a book, oftentimes something that you read, it'll spark a thought, and then the mind just wanders right down that thought chain. The eyes continue to follow right down through the book, but you're not getting any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. You can actually do that with the breath, too. Yeah. And yet the mind is off. Even though you're saying, yeah, I'm watching the breath, this other stuff over here is also happening. No, you want to actually to apply the mind to watching the breath. Apply the mind to this present moment. Mm-hmm. Apply the mind. In fact, you can start waking up all of the senses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're applying the mind to the here now, you have all the senses available. So what you can do is you can check, okay, what are the feet feeling? What's the legs feeling? What's the chest feeling? What's the arms feeling? What's on top of my head? Okay, so that takes care of the body. What odors do I smell? Yeah. What sounds do I hear? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you can do that then with the sight. You can take in a room like you're in, there's not much to look at. In the jungle here, there's just tens of millions of things that are visible, any one of which I can take as an object. But knowing if I take an object with the sight, that I'm actually throwing out and not paying attention to anything else. But when I'm not taking an object, then I'm overwhelmed with the amount of visual information. I'm also overwhelmed by the amount of sensual input from the body. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a lot of input that is happening in the present moment. So we want to kind of take an inventory of what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. What are my senses doing? Okay, and then you go back to the work, and then a little while later you come back, you wake up out of that, you come back and you really focus on the present moment. Mm-hmm. Be here now. Be here with the senses. Take a deep breath and really enjoy it. Yeah. Ah, this is success. This is satisfaction. Life is so wonderful right now. Okay, so that's the way to keep coming back and coming back and coming back over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. That's the way of practice. So when something happens that would normally be a state of suffering, you're much more likely to be there for it in reality rather than in the old instinctual bad habits of meeting anger with anger. Mm-hmm. Or with fight or flight or whatever like that. Instead, you can meet it with a smile. I mean, if I can come back to this present moment and take a deep breath and say, I really enjoy it, then that's the right thing to do when you hear somebody yelling at you. Mm-hmm. Don't pay attention to them yelling at you. Pay attention to how wonderful things are right now. Get some joy going, and then you can spread your joy back to them. You see, here's the thing about the mudita, the Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I know what metta is, and then I've
Okay.
heard the other one, karuna, is that compassion or something?
Mhm.
I don't know
Yes.
the others. I don't know the other
All
two.
right. Basically, compassion is the right view. One's right noble view is compassion. In other words, we're not taking our own personal point of view. We're seeing things from another person's point of view. So right noble view develops empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Right noble view and compassion are interrelated deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now when I say compassion, or the right word is empathy, because almost always compassion is pity, not
Mm-hmm.
real compassion. And not only that, well, we're looking at it through wisdom. In other words, when I see someone hurting, I understand they're hurting, but I don't have to join their hurting.
Yeah, that's actually funny you say that, because that's one of the biggest kind of unintended consequences that I've had of meditating is I don't feel guilt about things. Like I still have empathy, but I don't mull over, I don't think about it all the time. Like if I see someone in a bad situation, I'll try to help them if I can, but I won't think about it for the rest of the day. And that's
Right.
kind of a,
Okay.
I wasn't expecting that, but it's a really nice thing. I
Okay,
used to
so
feel
let's move
guilty.
then from compassion or karuna to mudita.
Uh-huh.
Mudita is translated often as sympathetic joy, but when they talk about it, they talk about it from a raw beginner's position and give the example that if I'm in competition for a job with somebody and they get the job and I don't, rather than being envious and angry because they got the job, I should invite them out to supper
Uh-huh.
instead. And whatever joy that they have for getting the job, I enjoy that along. I sort of sympathetically vibrate with their joy.
Uh-huh.
But that's not the real way of doing it. That's just the way of beginning to look at it. And you know that this vibration issue is really real, especially with music. That you can have a violin that's properly tuned sitting in a room. You can bring a trumpet in this player and he can play an A. And when he stops playing that A, everybody in the room can still hear that violin sympathetically vibrating on that A.
Okay.
Okay? So sympathetic vibrations are real in all cases, especially with feelings
Uh-huh.
or like-mindedness. So if you have a whole bunch of people who have one mindset, the new guy that comes in, his job is to join that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If you are with somebody who's angry, his job, he thinks, is to get you to be angry also.
Mm-hmm.
Probably at the same thing that he's angry at. So if he's angry at his bank, he wants you to be angry at the bank.
Yeah.
Okay? People who are in great grief will demonstrate it in such a way that everybody around them experiences that grief.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Same thing is true with joy. So if somebody comes to you angry, but you're going to do anapanasati for a minute and start developing some joy in that, then when you finally do interact with the angry guy, you can interact with him with joy.
Uh,
Your joy will overcome his anger because joy is more powerful than anger when it's done wisely.
so I'm confused by that.
All
So,
right, let me play that with you. Oh, I think you're about to smile. Look at that. You're going to smile. You know, I really like a smile. You're so aha, I see that smile. There it comes. Okay, you can do that with somebody who's angry, and you can get them to smile and come out of their anger about that fast.
the thing that I'm confused about is that, so you said that when somebody comes to you angry, then you practice anapanasati, and then you react in a good way. So does that mean that when somebody's angry, then you use the breath to become aware of the moment, and then you react a certain way? Okay.
hmm Just like we're doing when you're sitting on the cushion, just like you're doing when you're using your application.
I see. Yeah.
Uh huh.
Okay, so like the sati is being aware that this situation would normally trigger some reaction that is not an artful reaction. And as a result, I'm going to bring awareness to the breath just so I don't get swept up in emotion and act unwisely. And then I'm going to behave in a way that's more conducive for everyone to be happy in the situation. Is that kind of
Well, especially for you, knowing that your joy is going to, when properly used, is going to diffuse the situation.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. That makes sense. Cool.
It does. It works. It really does. Sympathetic joy really, really works. But also sympathetic anger works, and that works more often.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about that in the last couple of years. Yeah, no, well, I could go on a tangent, but yeah, I've learned a lot about that.
So you're also beginning to see that the quality of coming back and getting the ability to come back, so that just at the right time when you're most likely to not remember because it's stressful, that's the time that you really do want to remember. That's why we want to develop the habit of remembering and keep coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back over and over and over again. And by doing so, you're spending more and more time in the here now, more and more time in the state of joy and satisfaction. And remember that joy and satisfaction of the moment is the only benefit that you're ever going to get. That you're not practicing to become enlightened sometime in the distant future. You're practicing to be enlightened right now. So when you're sitting there staying in the here now, enjoying that breath and just be here now, that is enlightenment. It's not a state that you're going to get to eventually. It's some state that you can enjoy on a regular basis. There is a book, by the way, from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa that I would recommend on that topic. It's called Nibbana for Everyone. When he talks about the little Nibbanas. So that's what I recommend that you do, is you have a little Nibbana every time you can think of it. Have a little Nibbana. What is Nibbana? Actually, the word Nibbana comes from the quality of cooling off. Like you would take a pie out of the oven and set it on the windowsill to let it cool. If you give that hot pie to the kid, he's going to eat it, he's going to burn his mouth. So that's what, and what is the oven? The oven is the mind, the spinning mind. So by taking the mind out of that oven, it'll cool on its own, naturally. So that's why we come out of the hindrances, out of that burning mind of the hindrances, and be here now, and let the body and the mind cool off. That's a little Nibbana right there. And so that's what we want to do over and over and over and over and over again, often and often. If you work too hard at trying to maintain keeping the mind on the breath, what you're missing is the process of remembering, cleaning the mind, substituting whatever was in the mind for joy, success, satisfaction. Wow, I'm in the present moment now. So by just saying I can keep the mind on the breath all the time, you're missing out on that entire sequence. The sequence of remembering, of cleaning the mind, of throwing the stuff out, coming to the here now with great satisfaction. And then you start it over again. The mind wanders away. Never mind. I see the mind wandering away. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to clean out the mind. Whatever. If I was writing an email, I stopped at writing that email. And I take a deep breath. I no longer focus on the computer. I look out in the space. I get in touch with the body. I can feel the air. I feel the great satisfaction. And then I can come back and do the email. And I bet I can do a better email now than I could while I was stuck in that email before. just getting my mind completely off of it and completely into the here now. And so that's the thing that we're looking at, is that repetitive quality of coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. That builds a skill that steady state of just watching the breath over and over again doesn't give you.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has the danger that you can still watch the breath and the hindrances will come right back. They're just in the background now.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're in the background, you say, never mind, I'm not going to let that stuff in the background. I'm going to put something better in the background. I'm going to put the Four Noble Truths. I'm going to put the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to mess with that stuff anymore right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way of looking at it. So even though some teachers will say, oh, yeah, it's wonderful to be able to watch the breath all the time, what they're failing to mention is that when people do that, they're not actually watching the breath all the time. There's this subterranean hindrance dialogue that would have been there whether you were watching the breath or not. That's the stuff that needs to be interrupted.
I see.
It's those hindrances. So if you see those hindrances, if you're watching the breath and you recognize that the mind is still wandering away, then that's when you put that real strong effort in of actually throwing that stuff out by pushing it out with something that's more wholesome and more useful. An example of that would be a song, because sometimes songs are really, really hard to chase out of the mind.
Yeah.
The way to chase a song out of the mind is by using another song.
Okay.
And so the song that's stuck, you can get rid of that by doing another song, just for a short time. And after you get that first song thrown out, then you're free from it. Now you can stop the second song.
Mm-hmm.
If that first song does return, do it again. Keep throwing it out, and it will have less and less energy.
Mm-hmm.
We do exactly that same thing, except instead of throwing hindrances out with a song, we're going to throw them out with, let us say, the song of joy. Aha, I caught you. Aha, I'm going to have a really deep, good breath down. I'm going to enjoy the moment, and the hell with that email. And the hell with all the suffering that was going into it.
Mm-hmm.
Going into the writing of it. So this is the way of looking. I wanted to really get you established in this position of come back, come back,
Mm-hmm.
come back, come back. Clean the mind every time.
Is that what the binoculars are for?
The binoculars.
Behind you?
Oh, those were my grandmother's binoculars.
Oh, okay.
She died in 2002.
Uh-huh.
My uncle got those binoculars for her birthday so she could watch birds. Okay. I think I've watched a whole lot more birds than she ever did.
Yeah.
This is a really nice place for bird watching. We've got all kinds of things here.
Yeah, it looks like that. Looks like it would have some cool stuff.
Yeah, got lots of them. There's occasionally a green parrot. And that parrot is so green that you cannot tell that he's here until you see him move, because he just blends right in. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of different finches. There's the bird that we call kookaburra. They go cuckoo, cuckoo, and they talk to each other. You can hear them. Those sounds carry like a mile or so, and so you can hear the birds having conversations with each other. You hear the loud one first, but while he's silent, you can hear that the other birds are actually talking to him and answering him. So that's the answer to why the binoculars are there. It's an inheritance.
Yeah. Cool. I was just curious. All right. So, I guess that maybe I'll familiarize myself more with the Anapanasati Sutta, and I can look at your what you have online, and I can just kind of read around a bit. So then, next time we talk, I'll have some familiarity with that. Does that sound good?
Okay. All right. Be sure to Google Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. In fact, hang on just 1 second. Let me do something here. Is this the one? Nope. When Skype is busy, things get slow. Nope, that's not it. Ah, this is the one. Okay. I haven't done it on this YouTube yet. I don't see how to open an SMS text to send to you right now. I guess I'll have to send it to you after we hang up because I don't see how to do that right now. The old Skype, I knew how. But all I have here is add to favorites, block, delete, mark, profile. It doesn't have the send to SMS, so I don't know how to do it on this. That's an add to call. No, that's
I'll send a message and see if you get it. Does anything show up?
Yeah, send me a message and that'll get the window open, I'm sure.
I did. I just sent one.
Okay, I see what balloon went up. Let me see if I can. I like the old one better. Never mind.
Yeah, mine's an old version. My Skype is.
Oh, I got it. I found what to click finally.
There it is. I see it.
Oh, can you see this? That's what you had sent. I had seen that before, but I didn't know that that was from you the way that it done. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Actually, it looks like that I may have just sent Nirvana for everyone to you.
Yes. I've not looked at it yet though, but I can do that before we talk. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, so the link that I just sent you is about a whole lot of stuff, but Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is on the right-hand side at the top of that website, and there's a huge amount of stuff that's listed under him there.
Okay.
Sounds
good.
All right, so it's late. You're tired, yawning. I'll let you go.
Yeah.
Good to hear from you again. This has been a good chat.
Yeah. Take care.
All righty.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.